Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing really well. Today I'm going to be sharing with you all of my eyeshadow pans in my collection. I have actually hit pan on 24 eyeshadows in my collection this year alone, and so I felt like it was time to kind of redo this video. Even though I shared every single one of my eyeshadow pans with you at the beginning of 2022, there are just so many more to go through. This year was very successful for me in my Pan Those Eyeshadows project pan. I really didn't bring that many new eyeshadows into my collection either, so I was really focusing on the existing collection that I do have. I mostly have older palettes. I have a lot of palettes that are discontinued or were limited edition, so they have lots of years of use on them, and I was able to hit so many more pans this year, which is so exciting. And let's actually talk about my pan percentage. So I have a grand total of 66 eyeshadows in my collection that currently have pans. So we're gonna be talking about 66 eyeshadows in today's video. It will be a long one for sure, so definitely grab a snack or a tea or something. Altogether, I have 302 pans of eyeshadow in my collection. 66 of those actually have pan in them, and that brings me to a grand total of 21.85% pan percentage in my collection. Over a fifth of my eyeshadow collection has pan, which is so exciting. That's something that I'm really happy to say, and I want to see that number increase just given the fact that I am purchasing less and less eyeshadow. I think that is something that I'd be able to do, and that feels really good. So today I'm going to be walking you through every single one of the eyeshadows that have pan in them. I'm going to be starting with the palettes that have the fewest pans, and then we're going to work our way up to the palettes that have the most pans, so get excited. There is definitely a lot to talk about. I cannot wait. The first palette I want to talk about is the Catrice Basic Bay palette. This is an all neutral eyeshadow palette, and I just have one single pan in here. It's in the shade #Squad, which is like a kind of peachy transition sort of shade. Of course, this is going to be the sentiment with every single one of my palettes, but I would love to see more pans in here, so I'm going to try to not say that all the time. This formulation was really easy to hit pan on. It was a super easy to wear shade, and I foresee that being definitely the case with the rest of these. I just need to prioritize this. Maybe I will roll some of these shades into my Pan Those eyeshadows as my own kind of hand-picked selection, but yeah. One pan in there. Another palette that just has one pan is actually this custom palette from Mob Beauty. I just have pan in one shade here, which is the shade M48. It's like a metallic olive kind of tone. It's like a muted color. I was able to hit pan on that shade through my Pan Those eyeshadows this year, and I would love to see more pans in here. I oftentimes forget to reach for this palette just because sometimes I store it with my cheek products, sometimes I end up storing it with my eyeshadows. I never really know where to put this because it is a combination of different types of products. So yeah, I need to remember to reach for this more. This is definitely a really good reminder for me though. And then moving into the palettes that have two pans in them, I have my Catrice X Iman eyeshadow palette. This is the Bronzed AF palette. I don't believe this is available anymore, but this little 9 pan is so cute. It's actually so perfect for travel, and I've really enjoyed this over the fall time. I have pan in two of the probably easiest shades to hit pan on for my personal preferences. I hit pan on the shade Fairfax, which is like a cream tone, and I have pan in Sunset, which is like a kind of warm tan sort of shade. The rest of these don't look as loved, but you can see this is a really well loved on palette, and I quite enjoy this one. I also have pan in two shades in my Juvia's Place The Magic Mini palette right here. I hit pan on both of these in different rounds of my Pan Those Eyeshadows project. The first one I have here is this shade called Oshun, which is a shimmery pink. And then this year I was able to hit pan on this shade called Buzzo right here. It's a kind of metallic emerald green, and I don't know if you can see the pan there necessarily, but it is there. It's kind of up on the top of the pan though. Would love to see this looking more loved. This is such a gorgeous palette with a gorgeous color story. Oh, and I always get asked about this. The stickers in here are from the e.l.f. and J. Kissa to the Rescue palette. When that came out, I had just purchased this palette too, and I thought it was fun to pop a few stickers into here. It's not supposed to have those stickers, but I just thought it was fun to add them in, and they felt like they belonged with the color story of this palette. Moving into palettes with 3 pans, I have my Melt Cosmetics Smoke Sessions palette. Yes, I got through that. I always always get tongue-tied with that title. But anyways, I have 3 pans in here, like I said, in 3 of the metallic shades. So the first one is Granddaddy, which is like an antique gold sort of shade. Then I have pan in Sweet Tooth, which is a bright turquoise, and pan in Blue Dream, which is like a minty teal kind of tone. I love the formulation of all these. It can be a little bit difficult to work with these, but I love the pigmentation and the impact of these eyeshadows, so I had so much fun working on every single one of these. I would love to hit pan in the remaining metallics that are here. I don't necessarily foresee myself being able to ever hit pan on the matte shades here in the middle because they hardly look used, even though I've used them quite a lot, and they can be kind of patchy, but if they were to roll into my pan, those eyeshadows, I'll try my best on it for sure. And then I also have 3 pans in my Oma Beauty Black Magic Allure palette right here. I actually hit pan on 2 of these shades in my last year's round of Pan Those eyeshadows. This first one, called Lady of Gold, is like a soft kind of white gold shade, and I hit pan on that at the tail end of last year. I also hit pan on the shade Lush, which is a matte kind of forest green, at the tail end of last year. And I was working on the shade Allure in my Pan Those eyeshadows this year. I didn't hit pan before I wrapped up that project, but I actually hit pan on it a couple of weeks ago as well because I was really motivated to make it happen, and so I did. The rest of this palette doesn't look nearly as loved, but overall this is such a beautiful color story, and I do reach for this very frequently as well. So moving into palettes with 4 pans, and this is definitely the most large selection of eyeshadow palettes in my collection that have 4 pans in them. So this is something that I just found was kind of interesting. There's quite a lot of palettes here to chat through. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 palettes with 4 pans within them. So the first one is the Fenty Beauty Galaxy palette right here. Always so filthy, but this is such a beautiful, beautiful all metallic palette right here. Every single one of these eyeshadows are ones that I've hit pan on through my Pan Those eyeshadows over the last like 3 years. The first one here is the shade Ultraviolet. I just recently hit pan on that one. This one up here is called Planet X, which is just like a kind of warm bronzy shade. I've also hit pan in the shade Milky Way, which is a metallic kind of creamy tone. And then I've hit pan in Space Out, which is like a kind of smoky purple tone. Actually, I don't think I ever talked about what Ultraviolet. It's also kind of like a smoky purple color too. Love this palette, love the variety of different tones in here, and I just find this to be such an interesting and just dynamic kind of color story and texture of each of these shadows. So I'm so happy that I have this in my collection, and I would love, love, love to continue to hit more pans in this palette as well. I managed to hit 4 pans in my Natasha Denona Metropolis palette this year, which is so exciting because this is quite a large palette, and it is definitely my most expensive makeup item in general. So I actually have hit pan on 4 shades, and one of those I hit pan on today. I hit pan on this shade right here called Lethal, which is a matte kind of olivey army kind of green shade. You can see right in the middle there's a tiny fleck of pan. And I also, throughout my Pan Those eyeshadows project, hit pan in this shade called Orium this year, which is a stunning metallic green gold with a red brown base. I also did hit pan on, I believe that one's called Royal. Yes, Royal is that kind of deep forest kind of green shade, which is a matte formula. And then by reaching for this through my Pan Those eyeshadows, I actually did hit pan on this shade right here, which is called Chrism. I was able to hit pan on that warm tone kind of brown shade. I paired it oftentimes with Orium, that kind of green gold shade, through my Pan Those eyeshadows. So I was able to hit pan on that this year without it being technically a focus shadow. But overall, I am loving seeing this palette look more and more used. There's definitely some really good dips in some of the other shades, and I am so here for that. I love, love, love to see that. One of my older palettes in my collection is the Zulu by Juvia's Place, so it feels really good to have 4 pans out of the 9 pans in here. These shades don't have names, but I have pan in the orange matte shade. I have pan in the matte yellow here as well. I have pan in the matte pink shade and in the matte purple. I would absolutely love to hit pan in more of these, especially the metallics. I've been considering putting these into either like my project pan or pulling them in as my own selection in my Pan Those eyeshadows for like the spring and summertime. But this is definitely an older palette, but still a really good one in my opinion. Really great way to play with some serious color. In this singles palette, I have pan in 4 different shadows, and they're all from different brands. So they're all of varying ages and of different types of formulas. But in this palette, yeah, I'm happy to see that there's at least 4 pans. I would love to see many, many more, especially in my singles collection, because again, this is something that I oftentimes just forget to kind of reach into. This is a really great reminder. I have pan in the shade Crystalline, which is from Cleona Cosmetics. It is a stunning kind of ethereal eyeshadow. This is like a purpley silver blue kind of tone. It's really dimensional. I also have pan in the shade Wait For It, which is a matte coral from ColourPop. This is the first ever pressed powder shadow that I bought from ColourPop, so that is very old. So I'm happy to see that there's pan in it. I also hit pan in another one of these kind of brown based green gold sort of duochrome shadows, and it is ColourPop Tea Garden. And then I also have pan in one of my depotted ABH Norvina eyeshadows. This is the shade B2, which is a warm kind of bronzy tone. It's a hyper metallic. This is really, really shiny. It's a beautiful, beautiful eyeshadow. And all of these down in this bottom row are also from the ABH Norvina Volume 1 palette. My e.l.f. and J. Kissa to the Rescue palette is one that I've had for 2.5 years now, and I'm happy to report that there are 4 pans in here. Every single one of these, I'm pretty sure I hit pan on as a Pan Those Eyeshadows focus shade. The first one is Millie, which is a matte, kind of warm, bright orange shade. I also hit pan in Pepper, which is a true red kind of tone. Oh, Suki, I did not hit through my Pan Those Eyeshadows, but through reaching for this palette during my Pan Those Eyeshadows, I was able to hit pan on Suki, which is a stunning shadow. I adore this color so much. It is a soft orange that has a silvery, almost kind of reflect to it. It's really, really beautiful. And then I hit pan on Firefly as well as a focus in my Pan Those Eyeshadows, and this is just a good old standard true gold shade. Next up, we have my Melt Cosmetics Gemini palette, one of my like prized possessions in my eyeshadow collection, and I've actually hit pan on 2 of these shades recently since I wrapped up my Pan Those Eyeshadows project, because I have found myself very compelled to reach for this palette on the freaking regulars. So I recently hit pan in the shade Luna, which is just a warm beige kind of tone. In my Pan Those Eyeshadows a couple years back, I hit pan on Gemini, which is that kind of peachy, soft gold metallic. It is a very flaky and loosely packed sort of formula, so it was pretty easy to hit pan on that one actually. I very recently hit pan on the shade Leo. It was just like a week and a half ago. This is a stunning deep olive tone. Oh, it's so beautiful. And then in my Pan Those Eyeshadows this year, I was able to hit pan on the shade Fire OG here as well, which is just a little bit more of a muted and kind of lighter version of Leo, and it's such a great, almost neutral green, if that makes sense. I love, love, love the greens in this palette. They're phenomenal. I definitely foresee myself hitting more pans in this palette in the near future. I just love it. My Nabla Soul Blooming palette has 5 pans in it, and the pans that I have hit in this are the shade Gia, which is like a peachy kind of warm brown shade. I also recently hit pan in the shade Bolero, which is a matte coral tone. And then I also have pan in Garden Gate, which is really comparable actually to Cleona Crystalline, but it has more of a kind of pink and lilac versus the blue and purple. And then I have pan in Flowery, which is a stunning periwinkle shade, and in Philosophy, which is like this really, really unique soft pink with a blue kind of reflect to it. Gorgeous. This palette is incredible, and I'm so happy to see 5 pans out of the 12 pans in this palette. I don't have any eyeshadow palettes that have 6 pans in them, but the next palette we're going to talk about has 7 in it. It is my Urban Decay Born to Run. This is kind of an older palette in my collection, and it definitely is looking that way. I have pan in 7 shades, as I said. The first one is Breakaway, which is just like a satin kind of cream tone. And then I have pan in Stranded, which is actually a really beautiful kind of warm gold tone. And then I have pan in Blaze, which is a really interesting shade. I actually had overlooked this for a while, but it's kind of like a pearly pink with a soft gold kind of flip to it, Weekender, which is a just good old beige kind of tone, creamy beige. I also have pan in Ignite, which is just a gorgeous copper. I have pan in the shade Wanderlust, which is a metallic green tone. It's kind of like a foresty green. And then Drift, which is a really unique gunmetal color. It almost has like a purpley undertone. I honestly don't foresee myself trying to hit pan in too many more pans in this palette. I do want to hit pan in these mattes up here. I was working on Riff in my Pan Those eyeshadows, but I haven't yet hit pan on it. And then some of the other metallics maybe in this zone. But in my experience, the shades down on this end of the palette don't seem to perform as well, so I don't necessarily think that I'd like to hit pan on them, but we'll have to see what happens with my Pan Those eyeshadows in 2023. I may end up pulling in one of these kind of berry tones and it might end up actually working out all right, who knows. My ABH Subculture palette has 8 pans in it. I also recently hit pan on one of the shades in here, which is something that I was not anticipating, but I reached for this palette last weekend and I managed to hit a pan. So I have pan in the shade Dawn, which is again one of those great like transition kind of beige tones. And another pan here in the shade Mercury, which is kind of like a cool putty gray kind of tone. And the surprise pan that happened last weekend is in the shade Axis, which is this matte deep teal color. It's surprising that I've made that much progress on it, but yeah, I ended up hitting pan on that and it totally caught me by surprise. I hit pan in the shade Roxy a couple of years ago. This is kind of like a matte coral kind of tone. Electric, this was one of the first pans I think I hit in this palette. It is a beautiful green gold shade. It's very, very metallic and very reflective. I also have pan in New Wave, which is a matte kind of lighter orange tone. Untamed, which is a olive green, again, one of those like army kind of neutral greens. And Edge, which is a mustard tone. So yeah, collectively 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pans in here. Would love to hit pan on these remaining neutrals. I'm surprised I've not hit pan on Adorn or Fudge, but yeah, I will definitely do that in the future. And lastly, we have my Depotted ColourPop eyeshadows. These all come from a combination of the ColourPop Yes Please palette, Dream Street palette, Pretty Much palette, and the Raw Beauty Christie collaboration palette. I don't have every single shadow from those palettes remaining, but these are what I do have still in my collection from those 4 palettes. So I'm definitely not going to be able to remember the names of every single one of these shades. We'll go through them together, but I have 10 pans in these Depotted shadows. The first one is a vibrant red shade. I know this comes from the Dream Street palette, is the shade Spark. I also have pan in this one. I believe this is Champs. Yeah, this is Champs, which is just like a soft peach kind of tone. I believe that comes from the Yes Please. Next up is Magical, which is a, again, kind of like orangey sort of peach shade, and I believe that's from the Dream Street palette. This one here, I don't remember what this is from. Yabish. Yeah, Yabish, that's from the Pretty Much palette. I've also got a pan in Spoiled, which is a red tone that has a slight brown base, kind of like a brick red kind of tone. And this one right here, I think is OTP. Yep, OTP, which is a bright pink tone, and this comes from the Pretty Much palette. Another one from Pretty Much is this one called It Me, which is a kind of metallic taupey shade here. And then I also have pan on this one from the Dream Street palette, which is called Twinkle. It is a warm coppery kind of bronze tone. I also have pan in this kind of soft peach satin kind of tone. This is Mooney from the Dream Street palette. And then I also have pan in this one called Shooting Star, which comes from the Dream Street palette as well. And it is just a good old mid-tone brown kind of tone. So that, my friends, is all 66 eyeshadows that I currently have pan on. I'm hoping to increase that in the new year, and I don't foresee that being any sort of challenge for me because I have been just loving panning eyeshadows over the past few years. So yeah, that is everything. Thank you so much for watching and for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone.